Well, hello, everybody. My name is Patrick, and this is the Exponential Next podcast. I'm with my good friend, Eric Metcalf. Today, we're talking about network leadership and some of the challenges around governance and maybe even some of the conflicts that come up. So, Eric, you get that fun opportunity. But before we start, just how you doing? And tell us a little bit about what ministry roles and responsibilities you carry.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Patrick, and thanks for letting me be part of this. I love the conversation. Networks have, been a fun, interesting role that I've been able to play in for the last several years through what was New Thing, but now with us working with Exponential and serving here in Chicagoland. And yeah, you're asking how I'm doing. I think I'm doing pretty good. Got, all three of my kids are about ready to graduate from something. I've got a 18-year-old graduating from high school. I got a 21-year-old graduating from community college, so moving on to a university. And then I've got my oldest, my 22-year-old's graduating from college. So, and I'm in a busy season of transition. My wife and I are in our family of five, so lots of stuff going on. And yeah, things are going good with Exponential. Having a wonderful time. We've been able to get a lot done since our team has joined the Exponential team last April.
Yeah.
So very excited about all that.
Tell us about, so you carry a couple of different hats like we all do in ministry. Tell us about the role at Exponential that you play and then the role that you're playing in Chicagoland.
Yeah, my role with Exponential is a couple hats. One is helping Exponential build some momentum behind development or fundraising. So I serve with Alana Terry on the development team, which includes our relationship with churches in terms of church partners that are helping fuel and fund the mission. And then also organizations that are excited about the 16% mission as well, like churches are. They come alongside of Exponential's mission as strategic partners to help fuel and fund the mission and also provide turnkey solutions to whatever our friends are going through in terms of challenges and opportunities. So we have a number of strategic partners we work with in that space and a number of church partners that we work with in that space. In addition to that, I sit on the mobilization and practice team, serving our friends who are leading collectives. A collective is a group of networks. A group of networks is a group of churches. And we serve collectives in urban context or city spaces, but also in regional and affinity-based spaces. So there's a lot of fun going on in that as well. Those are the two hats at Exponential. And then the role in Chicagoland you asked about also is a fun little side hustle I get to do with the Chicagoland Collective team. Rodrigo Cano is the director of the Chicagoland Collective. He apprenticed with me over this last year and became the director in October of last year. And I serve, now he's my boss.
Yes.
So Rodrigo's my boss, and I serve on the team as focused on new networks and partnerships.
That's so cool. And I want to touch base on that, Eric, apprenticeship, because there's nobody I know better that lives it out than you do. And I love you just apprentice yourself to a new boss. So talk about kingdom, no kingdom. But that's how you roll, brother. I want to spend some time really digging into Chicagoland. Give us just a minute or two of the story of Chicagoland and particularly what the goal and the focus are. You've been playing an instrumental role for many years, but give it to me in your own words. What is happening in Chicagoland and what do you want to see happen over the next couple of years, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I really do feel like we're just getting started in this space. John Ferguson, John is co-founder of Community and New Thing, also on the Exponential team. His brother Dave is the CEO of Exponential, and John and Dave co-founded Community and New Thing years ago in Chicagoland. And Patrick, you've obviously been directing a part of the team over the years as well as a serial church planter, just like myself. So we've all been in the ecosystem of multiplication for quite a while and been partners in crime. But here in Chicagoland, John and I began to work with local churches. There were a handful of churches that wanted to, step into the space with us, and we formed our first couple networks in Chicagoland in 2019. And since that time, we've had, all kinds of opportunities where it feels like we're taking 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, where it's like this. We've all used the analogy. It's like herding cats as far as like getting
Yeah.
churches and pastors to work together consistently enough to gain enough momentum where you might start seeing this kind of like, oh, wow, we're starting to see some momentum of church multiplication happening here. So since 2019, we've been able to grow from a handful of networks. There's about 17 networks here in Chicagoland now with about 75 to 100 churches in those networks. that are working together to plant churches together. We have 4 or 5 networks being developed right now that are going to be launching here in the next several months. So we're hoping to hit somewhere between 20 to 25 networks by the end of the year. But I don't get too far ahead of ourselves in that because I feel like, our goal, you'll hear us say this oftentimes, is to start, sustain, and scale what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, like, it's not just about starting new networks. How do we sustain them and how do we scale them as they continue to grow? And praise God, we've been able to recently multiply a couple of our networks from within those networks. And it's not just by adding new networks, it's also multiplying existing networks, which is pretty cool.
It's so good. And there's so much to talk about in Chicagoland. I'm so excited about what you all and the team are doing. But I wanted to touch base and start with you personally. Just tell me a little bit about your aha around networks and collectives. Like you personally live into this in some significant ways and have for many years. But what is it about collectives and networks that drive your passion, drive your commitment? Because as you said, sometimes it's 2 or 3 steps forward, maybe 2, 3, 5 steps backwards.
Yeah, it's definitely,
But
yes.
but just depending. But yeah, tell me a little bit about your just kind of your passion point around this.
Yeah, I mean, I somehow early on in my faith journey, I didn't become a Christ follower until I was 16.
Mm,
Did not grow up in a local church, did not grow up necessarily in a Christian home,
mm,
and found my way back to God at the ripe age of 16, right? So stepped right into that and didn't know what I was saying yes to as I went on this journey with Jesus, and stumbled into vocational ministry as part of that spiritual journey early on. I got a tuition, a scholarship to go to Bible college, a seminary, and got a small group ministry degree, which is very odd that all this was happening. And I ended up getting connected to Community Christian Church, did my internship with the Ferguson brothers, and got wrapped up in that whole space and really just got enthralled and just excited about multiplication of leaders through apprenticeship, multiplication of small groups as a practical example of discipleship
mm.
and how you raise up new leaders. And that whole model, that whole experience, becoming a small group pastor, overseeing a small group ministry in a multi-site church, and being a part of 5 different startups in that space with new locations and new churches being started, and then with the birth of New Thing and all the multiplication strategies, those kind of simple systems of multiplication have always kind of fascinated me and always like inspired me. And going back to the early days of small group ministry, everything I learned about church multiplication, I learned in a small group, and just the simple practices of meeting consistently, setting the table consistently,
Huh.
being intentional about one-on-ones, praying together, dreaming big together. We nabbed a phrase from Jeff Bennett, who used to serve with Stadia, now with the Multiply Project. And Jeff would often say, dream big, start small, and execute like crazy. And that kind of simple practice has always kind of given me a conviction around networks. And how do we all right, let's dream big, of course, but let's start small and let's execute like crazy. And then the network model kind of gives us the handlebars to
Mm.
run that play. So it always kind of intrigued me, like, what if we could offer and somehow facilitate small groups for pastors versus just having small groups within a local church, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you've pioneered so much. So with this conversation, I want to because you have a lot of wisdom, I think, for network leaders. You've led one, you've reproduced networks, you scale networks, you get to work with dozens of leaders in Chicagoland every month around this. But what is the core competency of a network for you? Why is it good that leaders are part of networks?
Yeah, that's a fair question. We all know that, like, one of the things that pastors struggle with is loneliness
Mm,
and isolation. And it's in that loneliness and in that isolation where things can creep in that might separate us from others and separate ourselves from God. The Bible talks about that as sin,
mm,
and these kind of dark habits or dark things that kind of take us to places we don't want to go. So being in relational accountability with others can give us the strength and the comfort to know that we're not alone. Give us the peace when we might feel anxious or depressed from the
mm.
roles that we carry.
Yeah.
I had a friend who used to describe it as either most of life is either being overwhelmed or underwhelmed, and it's in those spaces where it can just get very difficult. So
Yeah.
the power of networks, like we want our friends and our local churches to be in community with others, it gives us an opportunity as leaders to be in community with others like us. And so I really respect the potency of that. But in addition to, the spiritual formation and the accountability and the friends on mission vibe of it, it also gives like a unique space to kind of poke each other in the chest as friends on mission and say, hey, when are you going to start your next church?
Right.
When's your next leader going to emerge that might go launch a new micro church or launch large macro church or a new faith community or a new faith expression that might reach people who are far from God? What's that look like for you to raise up your next leader? In fact, I want to help you do that.
Yeah.
What do you need in order to accomplish that? And so the power of networks, to me, it's the relational accountability for what all of us are trying to do together, but also multiplying more churches together if we could.
And when you say, I mean, obviously the phrase friends on mission, but you see that as kind of symbiotic. Like you don't see multiplication happening outside of relationship and relationship not happening out of multiplication. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, here in the West, specifically here in the United States, we just can't help ourselves but institutionalize stuff.
Mm, yeah.
I think as much as we think we got away from England and we're free from Europe as a free country, I think I think the last quarter century has proven we still like to institutionalize
Yeah,
things. We
we
just can't help it.
do.
Um,
That's for
and the
another
church is no
podcast.
yeah, and the church is no different. I
Yeah.
mean, we can't help ourselves. And I'm not anti-institution. I don't think the institutions are necessarily bad because they can do a lot of powerful things. And again, that's another podcast to get into all that kind of stuff. But it does influence how we think about multiplication, though, because we've over institutionalized it, where we've handed it over to denominations, we've handed it over to seminaries, and we've not allowed ourselves to think about the role that we play in that as leaders in the kingdom,
Good.
as leaders in the local church. And the power of networks, what it does is it forces those leaders as friends on mission to really begin to wrestle with what's my role in that?
Mm,
How has God wired and gifted me
mm.
to play in the multiplication game? And the network model, to overuse a term, decentralizes multiplication and allows for everybody to play in that game, not just institutions.
So good. So good. So back to Chicago now. You guys are obviously playing the ground game of starting, sustaining, and scaling networks. Eventually, I want to ask you some questions about network leaders and network leadership. But talk to me about how you think about networks scaling into collectives in Chicagoland, and is more what you're after? What are you guys doing specifically as a leadership team in Chicago to cultivate these small networks, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, I had the opportunity when I served with New Thing, and we were serving globally. I mean, New Thing grew to about 35,000 churches that were aligned in over 1,000 networks around church multiplication, serving in 70 different countries.
Mm,
But the way that we got into all those spaces, and you know this, like we operated on a dime, was that we didn't try to grow an institution or a denomination. We simply tried to serve as
mm,
really almost like a missions training agency
mm.
to come alongside these leaders in their local contexts. And God kind of gave us the ability. And I mean, I went to like 30 countries in 5 years, if
Yeah.
you remember. So I was like,
Yeah.
I was an ambassador on behalf
Yes.
of New Thing, just going everywhere. And lots of, fun and interesting stories from doing all that. But one of the things that we kind of learned in those spaces was how to look for what we began to refer to as an apostolic person of peace. And it was that, if you could use maybe an acrostic to describe that, an APOP,
Yeah.
an apostolic person of peace, God could like do remarkable work when we were able to identify who that person was, because then they were the kind of person that would convene others in their space. And their space could be a geography, or it could be an affinity
Mm,
where they feel kind of called. And taking that kind of experience globally is really what has impacted our ability here locally,
yeah.
here in Chicagoland. Because as we know, our cities are very diverse spaces, right? Both in age and socioeconomic status and ethnicity and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we've tried to do since 2019 is to kind of look for and pray for those apostolic persons of peace, whether they're in Gary, Indiana, which is one of the D's in Chicagoland,
Mm,
or whether it's like in downtown in the city of Chicago with a young professional who might be leading within the marketplace. We're just doing our best and trying everything we can to kind of like pray for and look for those apostolic persons of peace. And then when we see the potential in them, we begin to kind of meet with them and help them kind of form that first network of church leaders or churches that might plant churches together.
That's great. So what specifically are, maybe I don't want to say the characteristics or qualities or postures of a network leader? You've been doing this for a number of time. You've poured into countless numbers of network leaders. Give us the two, three, four things that you're looking for to come alongside.
Yeah, I mean, some of this is intuition, some of it's experience, but certainly we've tried to write some things down just as
Mm,
we're learning as we go.
yeah.
And again, this still just feels so new. In other ways, it also just feels really old because, I've been somehow plotting the course in the ministry space for about 26 years. And in that space it's informing kind of how I think about this space. Because when you're thinking about the growth of a new small group in a local church, and you think about the growth of a network in a city, there's just some similar characteristics.
Good.
And I think, if I could pick, it'd probably be the three must haves that we've talked about in our apprentice material, that we've talked about as we look to launching new works in new countries around the world. Um, those three are spiritual velocity, relational intelligence, and teachability.
Mm,
And I think those core characteristics is where you start. You're really trying to see, do they have momentum in their faith? Are they a kingdom over castle leader? All those kinds of things. Do they have teachability? Are they willing to listen, then apply it? Are they modeling this humility that we want to see in leaders? And they're always growing. And then are they a kind of leader that other people want to be around? Do they have good self-awareness? Is their relational intelligence high enough that they can attract others around them? And I don't mean like from a, charismatic only kind
right.
of personality, but they're the kind of person that people want to hang with. I mean, I know plenty of leaders that don't have that quote unquote charisma that people might look for, but they are certainly like the kind of leader that people want to be around, because you can tell by the kinds of stories that they're able to tell and the stories that people tell about them. So if you can kind of identify those core characteristics, then you start to look for other components to help kind of see if there's an opportunity to form a new network. And that takes nuance, that takes intentional coaching and relationship time. So I've had lots of coffees and lots of beverages with my friends, and just taking steps to kind of see, is this the right place? Is the soil fertile? Can we try to grow something together to launch a new network?
So you say a number of really interesting things. One of them is, people who might be listening to this podcast, potential network leaders. There's, at least in some of my conversations, there's always this, I don't have time, I don't have the skill set. You're speaking very differently than just, hey, I lead a local church, I've grown it to 400 people, I'm ready to lead a network. Talk to us a little bit about why network leadership needs to be diverse, because you're experimenting for some really interesting things in the city, like you said, microchurch networks everywhere to prevailing model churches. But I do think there's this sense sometimes when I see some of the qualities that you've just described, then there's this next response is, well, I'm not, I can't lead other pastors. So help us just break that ice a little bit, because if we're going to need more networks, we're going to need to get more network leaders engaged. And oftentimes there's this resistance right up front where I don't have what it takes to lead a network. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's a fair question, and that's a challenge
Mm,
also here in the U.S. I mean, we tend to want things to grow, and we want things to be big,
yeah.
and then we tend to want to buy the book, listen to the podcast, or go to the conference based on that leader's influence and the size of their
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
And there's pros and cons to all that, right? And certainly, maybe one of the cons is that it really removes a lot of people from playing in the game, because maybe not everybody's supposed to have a large church. Maybe
Yeah.
not everybody's supposed to grow their church to a
Yeah.
certain size.
Yeah.
And maybe some of us are just meant to multiply the small.
Huh.
And that's exactly what God has put us in place to do. So I feel like it's important for us to like look at everybody as a potential network leader, and really just kind of trying to have some imagination around that. create some space. Our old friend Alan Hirsch talks about missional imagination,
Yeah.
and I think we've kind of lost
Hmm.
that edge here in the West, here in the United States. And if we can take the time to dream big and really just ask God to show up in unique ways that you can't see yet, and have some imagination around this, we might find leaders where we least suspect to find them,
Yeah.
and not always try to tap the usual suspect on the shoulder to participate with us. And frankly, there's a practical issue to that. Usually, the usual suspect already has a million people tapping on
Right.
their
Right.
shoulder.
Right.
So, like, you're kind of just getting in
Hmm.
line is all you're doing. And so, part of what from a practical standpoint, if you can increase your imagination around this, and you really genuinely believe that any leader can play at the network level, um, you start to see the potential in everyone, and you start to recognize there's just a lot more opportunity there than maybe you saw before. And so that has helped us to kind of lean into spaces that allow for us to have a diverse group of networks. We have geographically based networks and we have affinity based networks here in
All right.
Chicagoland. And I think it's come out of that kind of posture of, um, if this person is filled with the Spirit of God
Hmm.
and they're convinced that they're leaning into kingdom over castle principles, and they have these core characteristics that we talked about earlier, man, maybe they have the potential to lead a network. Let's talk about that. Let's have a conversation about that. Let's create some awareness around this and build some. We talk about giving them language and license. So if we get together with them, can they begin to apply some of the things that we talk about?
All right, so we've found the person of peace. They're stepping into network leadership. The network is part of a collective. The collective has got this big kingdom vision of reaching Chicago in the myriad ways that we talk about it. But what are some of the barriers that you see particularly in Chicagoland, for networks? You mentioned friends on mission, so this idea that we are going to take care of one another, but we're going to keep it about the mission as well. There's a tension to be managed. But what are specifically some of the barriers that you're seeing at present that maybe would help out some network leaders avoid?
I'd say one barrier in particular that's always there for us. We have zero control over these leaders.
Mm.
We're not paying their salaries.
That's
We're
right.
not like dictating, their scorecards. We're not like all that stuff. Let's just state that as the obvious. I'd say the second thing is the prevailing church model job description doesn't necessarily include this stuff.
Interesting.
The prevailing church model job description includes preaching a message every week and making sure you have a drummer and
Yeah.
making sure you have staff members who are leading your different ministries. And the goal is to go from part time to full time. And we need, a building to facilitate our gatherings on Sundays. Like all the stuff that prevailing model pushes for does in fact limit people's ability to do some of this work. And so then what that unintentionally does is it turns whatever we're trying to do as optional.
Hmm.
As they kind of look at their 7-day week and there's a Zoom call for network leaders to lead networks. So those networks multiply churches and your schedule's packed.
Yeah.
You're just not going to show up on that Zoom call.
Yeah.
So as a team, we have to continue to push ourselves and poke each other in the chest and go, hey, remember our responsibility is to set the table. We're just going to set the table. We're
Right.
going to pray that people show up.
Huh.
We're going to keep inviting and we're going to keep plotting the course. And no matter who shows up, it's okay. It's not personal. They're not trying to attack us. They're not against what we're trying to do. It's just that right now in this season, they're not yet able to sit at the table. So the whole job description thing plays a part. I think, the prevailing model, all that kind of stuff, does create its own challenges. And, frankly, financially, it's challenging because you're kind of always feeling like you're being underserved or under-resourced in the work you're trying to do. We're not trying to build a large budget. We're not trying to build a large staff. We're not trying to become a denomination or institutionalize, but it does take resources to facilitate what we do. And many of the experiences that we facilitate, there's no cost to it.
Yeah.
On the user side. So we're trying to provide support on the back end so that we can financially, so that we can run that play and make it as accessible as possible to everyone that's participating. And so the financial challenges are definitely there as we try to run this play every year, almost like similar to what we were doing with New Thing, being a missions training agency that's serving these leaders here locally, here in Chicagoland. So yeah, those are some of the challenges.
Let me ask you this question, and we'll come right back to network leadership. Chicago's as you said, it's a diverse place. The nations are in our backyard.
Yeah.
Talk to me about cross-cultural relationships amongst networks and network leaders.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, how do you get diverse people working together in networks? Just your thoughts. And then secondly, what role specifically, if we're really kingdom players, what role specifically does justice play? I know that's a loaded word, but in a place like Chicago, you're dealing with a whole bunch of
Yeah.
issues, right? So just go there for me, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started our first couple of networks here in Chicagoland, we strategically did not go geographic with
Mm,
those networks.
mm,
The leadership that was forming those networks all agreed that if we did that, it would actually do us a disservice
yeah, interesting.
to gain the momentum we wanted to see here in the city because of our conviction around justice
Yeah,
and our desire to see our city united, like Jesus prayed for in John 17, for
yeah,
the church to be one, knowing that Sunday is the most segregated day of the week,
yeah,
specifically in our city. I know this is true of many cities, but I think if I understand correctly, statistically, Chicago is one of the most segregated cities in our country. We have a long history of segregation in our city. You could almost, if I could just be a little hyperbolic, the north side of the city is mostly Anglo, the west side is mostly Latino, and the south side is mostly African American.
mm.
And that segregation of our city, if we just did geographic networks, we would just separate the ethnicity of our
Just
city into those
perpetuate the
networks.
problems, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, so we decided to strategically not do that
Mhm.
and invite churches that weren't in the same geography to meet together monthly in the beginning. And what that led to, one of our very first church plants through one of our first networks in 2021, somewhere around there, we planted a church on the far north side of the city in a community that's predominantly our police who serve our city live in this neighborhood. And this church was planted through a network of diverse churches, some from the south side, some
Yeah.
from the west side, some from the north side. And we had one of our churches on the south side, an African American church, that helped pay for a startup in that space.
Wow.
Um, and it was just such a beautiful testimony, the church working together
Yeah.
from a diverse group of communities in the city. Um, as we've kind of like plotted the course and kept kind of growing momentum behind church multiplication in diverse contexts, we've been able to see some cool things happen. We've been able to pioneer and pilot in the last couple of years. We began gathering our Spanish speaking friends into a space where we have a Spanish speaking gathering for church planting and church multiplication. We do those 3 times a year. We now have several Spanish speaking networks that are planting Spanish speaking churches.
Great.
Um, and then more recently, we're starting to launch some new networks that will serve the African American church and help do some revitalization
Mm.
and multiplication in that space as well. So we still have such a long ways to go, but we're trying our best to kind of lean into these different diverse spaces in terms of ethnicity. Yeah.
And you have, I mean, this is a diverse movement. So what exactly, and you mentioned it there, you gave that beautiful story of churches working together to plant churches in our city. What, like, how do you keep the focus on mission? In my mind, it always evolve into, hey, I just like hanging out with these people. This is awesome. Let's go have some more coffee, or get lunch or
Yeah.
whatever. But how do you talk about the mission and keep it about the mission and the networks in the city?
Yeah, that's fair. And I kind of operate under that assumption that's what we're all trying to do.
Sure.
That none of us are trying to really just reach the city by ourselves.
Yeah.
And you've heard me use the phrase a couple times. It's certainly a phrase that we've coined, the kingdom over castle.
Yep.
Like we're trying to sit down with leaders and sniff out leaders to see if they really get what we're trying to accomplish. And so but that being said, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of, why are we doing this? What's the point of this? Is it just to like have coffee and have snacks together and, let's have as many meetings as possible and do nothing? But no, that's not what we're doing. Like, that's not the goal. That's not the objective. We really are trying to lock arms so we can see if we could, over time, prayerfully see a multiplication movement across Chicagoland. But yeah, I mean, it does help to have some strategic partnerships that keep us focused on that. Our friends at Christ Together is they're wonderful friends on mission because they bring that kind of conviction of, we're not just called to our neighborhood, we're called to our city. And
Mm,
if we're going to reach our entire city, how would we do that by ourselves as
yeah.
one church? Well, we
Yeah.
can't. We need to be able to lock arms with other churches, put our arms around other churches and do it together. And, how do we operate as one? Again, as Jesus prayed in John 17, and see these churches begin to see themselves as friends on mission so
Yeah.
that they can plant together and pray together and dream big together and plant churches together. It's not easy. And that's partly why we gather, in our gatherings several times throughout the year. It's also why we want our networks to meet monthly.
Yeah.
We know that mission moves at the speed of trust. And
Okay.
so if the frequency is high in these networks, then that trust goes up high. And if
Good.
the trust is high, then you can get a lot done in a little amount of time. I mean, praise God, we've seen over 75 new churches started here in Chicagoland
Amazing.
through these networks
That is
since
amazing.
2019.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting close to 100 new
Wow.
churches that have been started since 2019. And those are church plants just in Chicagoland.
Wow.
That doesn't count the churches that we've planted across the United States and around the globe through these networks. And that would be in the hundreds. So it's been again, we have such a long ways to go because it's a big city that we live in, but God's been good so far in this effort of bringing these churches together in networks.
Great. Let's talk about conflict in the network, shall we? Because we're talking about all the great things that are going on.
No, no, we're only going to talk about up and to the right, baby.
Yeah. And I think you named it, Eric. When you talk about networks, I hear you saying, in not so many words, they're dynamic. They come and go. They ebb and flow. They move. Some start, stutter, and peter out. Others start and blossom. Um, and obviously, human beings, you mentioned it, full of sin and brokenness, and we bring our own egos to the table. You also mentioned, and I love how you talk about it, the paradigm of, hey, I'm here to grow my church versus I'm here to bless the city is always in competition with one another. So inevitably, there's some conflicts that happens in networks. What as kind of like a leader of this movement in Chicagoland, how do you deal with that? What are you doing? How are you coaching network leaders? What do you do when there's a problem? Talk to me about it.
Yeah, I mean, not an easy space for me to go into because of how my brain works. I tend to see things, hey, the glass is half empty and we're going to fill it. That's kind of how I'm wired.
Right. This will only get
Optimistic.
better. This will
I'm
only
an
get better.
optimistic realist. I'm an optimistic realist is probably the best way to describe myself. Makes me a little schizophrenic at times, if I'm being honest. Um, but I will say, I mean, yeah, I mean, of course, you mentioned ego. Um, we can't help ourselves as humans on this side of eternity to
Mm,
find ourselves in competition with one another.
yeah.
And that can happen among organizations if we're not careful,
Mm,
where we kind of think as organizations, we've got this covered.
wow.
And we do it better than everybody else. And so certainly that castle over kingdom mindset can creep in when you're leading
Wow.
organizations.
Mm,
And so here in Chicagoland, there's a lot of organizations that have over the years made significant impact in our city and in our suburbs that might find themselves not locking arms around this cause. They might find themselves competing
wow.
in these different spaces. And so we have to do a lot of work on our side from the Chicagoland Collective to hit pause and show up at stuff, to pray for our friends, to meet with our friends.
Right.
And that can cause conflict sometimes if we're not doing that correctly or wisely, unintentionally
Mm,
or intentionally, if we
right.
find ourselves thinking we do things better than they do, fill in the blank. Um, so I would say that's a potential place of conflict. I would also say, in our networks, because it's a relational system. If a pastor has a moral failure or makes some choices that don't lead to great outcomes, that can impact our ability to have a network leader in a role. That's maybe they've been a great convener, maybe they've had all the characteristics we talked about earlier. Maybe they've been able to help even start some churches. But if that pastor has to step away for a season or step out of that role, that obviously affects that network and its ability to grow and multiply. So those are challenges that we've encountered as we've been doing this for the last several years. Chicago's had some hits with some leaders that have been pretty significant, and that causes wow, what are we doing? And what's all this for? And this has been so hard to get to where we've gotten to, and now we're going to take how many steps back?
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff can be draining. It can be exhausting. It can make you wonder, what is it that we're trying to do?
Right.
And just to be completely transparent, we just tried for the very first time a bilingual gathering this last Friday.
Yeah.
And the
How'd it go?
bilingual gathering was it. I would say the experience was great, except the participation wasn't what we thought it was going to be.
Really?
We knew that we were trying something new.
Uh-huh.
We had never done a gathering on an evening.
Okay.
And the reason why we chose to do it on an evening was to try to pull in our bivocational leaders or our no vocational leaders and give them access to what we're doing because we normally meet during the day. The second thing is we did it in Spanish, bilingual, because we want to lean into a space to let our brothers and sisters know in solidarity that we see them and we
That's
know
good.
what we don't know exactly what they're going through, but we're praying for them and we want to show that we're friends on mission.
Mm.
So we did a bilingual experience on a Friday night, provided a meal, invited spouses, and the response was mediocre. It
Okay.
wasn't like oh my gosh, this is the best thing we've ever done. And granted, it was new.
Yeah.
Um, but like, and I'm glad that we tried it as a team. I'm glad that we have some things to learn from that. But yeah, I think we all kind of looked at each other like, wow, I thought we were doing something great here. What the heck?
Yeah. Right. Well, and
So you have those, yeah, yeah, go ahead.
no, no, I appreciate the vulnerability, brother, because yeah, it's easy to celebrate all the great things that are going on. And you said a few things that I think are just super wise and healthy, is we're trying new things. We
Yeah.
have certain expectations when we try those new things, and when they don't work out, there's that bummer. And then like you said, you do your after action, triage. What could we have done better? But then you get back in it. So what is the key learning out of that? Just out of curiosity, what are you thinking that might need to shift just based on that experiment? Because I think it's a really interesting case study.
I mean, it could be as simple as the fact that we did it on a Friday night.
Right. Okay.
That could have been just a practical
Yeah.
thing. It also could be that it was an evening thing, and that may not be a reality for us to bring our demographics together.
Interesting.
And because maybe our full-time vocational people don't want to give up a weeknight for something like that. And frankly, as somebody who worked in the full-time vocational space, maybe I kind of get that if
Yeah.
I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
As much as I have this altruistic vision of what I think could be if we could all get everybody in the same room together, bivocational, co-vocational, vocational, all in the same space, we're on the king. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's just a really impractical thought. I don't know. But I mean, I don't know. I feel like we're still learning. It sounds silly to keep saying that, but I just think it's a reality of what we're doing. And how we're trying to play in a lot of different types of spaces,
Right.
not just one space. We're trying to multiply and mobilize micro, macro, and everything in between
Yeah.
here in Chicagoland. And because we're doing that, we're just still learning as we go. It's not quite as simple plug and play as maybe what we've done over the years.
Well, and I just got one more question for you, brother, but what is just really clear to me, and I just want to say thank you for what you're doing because yeah, you mentioned it when you try something, particularly, on limited resources, limited time, limited energy, you use a lot of your relational equity to point people in a certain direction. But what I love about what you just coached us through is as a as a leader of this citywide movement or as a network leader or as a collective leader, you always have to be trying and you always have to stay engaged relationally.
Yeah.
How do you personally do that? Does it really just come back to the core conviction about kingdom? You're obviously a very relational person, but how do you just kind of say, all right, I'm moving on? Uh, yeah, because I think people can be so discouraged, and I've had so many conversations with collective leaders and network leaders who basically say, tried that, didn't work out for me. You know? We
Oh, trust me, I've had those thoughts
Right,
many,
right. We
many
we
times.
we want to change that. So how do you just personally deal with that? And then what coaching would you have for somebody who is maybe discouraged at this moment leading a network?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Like, let's all say that we've thought that and we've felt that over the years. Well, let's be honest. Uh, but I would say what has helped me kind of stay the course is being in community with other leaders who are
Yeah.
trying to do it.
Mm,
So we all need peer groups that are like challenging us and encouraging us and helping us see beyond what we can't see. So we host a monthly call
Nice.
through Exponential. It's our collective leader community, and it's for leaders who are trying to do, and they're just praying for a movement in their cities or in their region or for a particular people group. And so that collective leader call helps me personally just to be in that space. Um, to remind us what we're trying to do here in Chicagoland is not we're not the only ones trying to do this. There are other leaders like us who are trying to do this. Also leaning into some of my own global experience and being in other cities around the world, like Karachi, Pakistan, or like name the city. I mean, all the
You've
places
been in
I
some
got the
crazy
chance to go visit.
places.
It's like, oh yeah, like there's other leaders like me, and they're trying to do this in other spaces.
Yeah.
We can do this. We can do this together. So that helps. And participating in the exponential conferences
Hmm.
also helps. Being in those spaces around other leaders who are trying to do this.
Good.
And you know, at the end of the day, like no one church is going to reach an entire city. No one church is going to reach the region that you're a part of. No one church is going to reach a people group or an affinity that you feel called to.
Yeah.
It's just not the way it's going to happen. We
Yeah.
have overemphasized the local church and their ability to do that. We need to get back to what Jesus prayed for. And so I have this conviction that all churches in the name of Jesus need to be locked arms together. And the network and collective is a simple system that lets us do that together. And so I just try to keep praying for that to come into reality, keep leaning into that space, keep showing up, keep setting the table, and doing everything we can to lean into this friends on mission, kingdom over castle posture. That's my conviction. I'm going to try to stick with it. We'll see how it goes.
Brother, I can't, you mic drop. I'll just leave it at that. So, if somebody wanted to get involved with Chicagoland, how would they do that? We'll get that on the screen, but what's your email or what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so we're kind of like in a transition from domains and emails and branding.
Yeah,
We are referred to now as the Chicagoland Collective.
good.
Our website is about to go live. We're
Okay,
very close. So I will give you my exponential email. How
please.
about that?
Yeah.
So it's not confusing to everybody. My email is Eric, ERIC, at exponential.org. And we would love to talk to our friends in Chicagoland about how we can do more together. That'd be awesome.
Good. And then for those of you listening who are ready to start a network, Exponential, my good friend Eric and others on our team have helped produce what we call the Reproducing Network Accelerator. It's a short, sharp engagement to help people like you start a new network. And so if we can do that, we'd love to help you do that. So
Yeah, heck yeah.
Eric, I just want to say thanks, man. Thanks for your leadership, your friendship, your enthusiasm for the mission, even on days when I'm not as enthusiastic. I can kind of always rely on you, like, we'll figure it out. Don't worry. So I know we commiserate sometimes, but I just appreciate your passion for the mission because it inspires so many of us around us. So, and I want to say thanks for your time today. I really appreciate the conversation, and I look forward to seeing what is next through not only your particular cause in Chicagoland, but then also what we can do together to help serve networks all around. So, yeah, man, thank you.
Thanks, man. Thank you.